He's been teaching. Again, we've just started the recording. So as you all know, we're here for the fourth and final keynote or headline presentation. This one is by Juan de Dios Ortuzar, focusing on bicycling, which is a killer mode. And I don't mean that it's a dangerous mode, although Mickey, who's in the audience here, can tell you otherwise. But and I've hurt my wrist twice bicycling. So, but it is a fantastic mode. I mean, you can go. It is the most efficient mode, right? You can go faster and further than walking. In fact, I take my dog out on a bicycle each night because it is tedious to walk that dog so often, and so he gets a lot of exercise very quickly, and I get his walk in very quickly because of the use of the bicycle. But it's a great mode for anything under maybe 10 kilometers in distance. And as many of you know, Juan de Dios has pioneered a lot of discrete choice modeling, but he's really a leader in the whole system of equations that go into travel demand forecasting. And he's done a lot of work in willingness to pay as well, because you can infer a lot of that directly with the econometrics. He's published 10 books, which is incredible. You know, that is so much work. And of course, co-author and supervisor of so many terrific people around the world. So we're very, very fortunate that he agreed to be with us today for the fourth, basically, series of tracks, the second day here in the Western Hemisphere for the Bridging Transportation Researchers Conference. And so Juan de Dios, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? I know, you know, in December, there's going to be an International Association of Travel Behavior Research Conference in person in Santiago, Chile. And so that's where his university is. And a lot of us will be in mid-December when the spring and summer, and so the middle of, I guess, the start of summer in the Southern Hemisphere. So Juan, the table is yours to share your screen and to share anything else you'd like.
So I will try to share my screen now. Okay, next one. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I'm happy to be here. I'm very sorry that this didn't work as I was expecting. I will briefly talk about this work that we did with Margaret Gutierrez, who did her PhD, supervised by myself and Professor Ricardo Urtubia here in Chile, which is more than myself an expert in bicycles. I will briefly talk about the study context. Then I will mention the research hypothesis that we had, methodology and results, and finally implications and conclusions. Let's move now to the study context, please, Cara. I would like you to see that we are, I would like you to show to you the realities of Latin America, in a sense, by comparing two very different conurbations. The first one is Barranquilla in the north of Colombia. It's the fourth largest city in Colombia, with approximately 2.2 million inhabitants, and Santiago, which is the capital and the largest Chilean metropolis, with approximately 6.5 million inhabitants. You can press down so we can appear the next, yes. These two cities differ not only in their size and extension. For example, Santiago is now about 900 kilometers square, but also, and very markedly, in terms of their social demographics, income, for example, no, not yet, and particularly climatic conditions and the organization of the public transport system. Okay, Barranquilla is, for those of you that don't know it, is the land of the Caimán. I don't know whether you remember a very famous song, Se va el Caimán, se va el Caimán, se va pa la Barranquilla. That's a very lovely song. Caimán is actually an alligator, but it made a reference to a person. It was funny. 2.2 million trips per day, 44% of them by public transport. The public transport system is composed of mainly old and badly maintained buses of various size and types. And they have also two BRT corridors, 14 kilometers in total, but they are used only by 2.2% of the total daily trips. Next one, please. And apart from cars and motorcycles, the city also has a variety of informal transport services, such as moto taxi here, bicycle taxi like rickshaws, shared taxis, which are not regulated, but this represents 7.4% of the total daily trips. And as you can see here, the motorbikes, this is not a very representative picture of Barranquilla because it's much more chaotic than this, but they tend to use the cycle lanes, which is a bore, as I will mention later on. The next one, please. We label in our paper that Barranquilla is an aggressive city for bikers. Why I say that? Well, only 2% of total daily trips are made by bike here. The reasons are the city has a very discontinuous network of only 14 kilometers of bike lanes, which are apart and they don't match the OD travel patterns of the city. Next. The weather conditions are really not easy for cycling. They have a very high average day temperature, 28 degrees Celsius, which is something like 82 Fahrenheit, and they can reach up to a maximum of 32 degrees, which is about 90 Fahrenheit almost all year round. But also, they have a very high average relative humidity, around 80%, and two heavy rain seasons that affect mobility. Some days, not even motorized transport can circulate until rain stops. I mean, I was not in Barranquilla, but in Bogota, and it's no use an umbrella there. When it rains, you are soaked, no matter what. Now, on the other hand, also they have a lot of traffic accidents. Traffic is not very well organized there. So 6,000 traffic accidents causing 110 fatalities in 2017. Of these, 6 fatalities were bicycles and about 1,200 injured victims. About 85 of them were bicycle users. Not very many, but because they don't have too many bicycle users. Now, they have to compete, the cyclists, with road space, with cars and buses. Their cars and buses don't really respect the meter around the bicycles, so it's dangerous. But also they have these millions of motorcycles, and they also use the scarce cycle lanes, which are constantly invaded. So really it's not very safe. Now, finally, the people that use active modes, not only cycling, but also walking, in general feel rather insecure because there are frequent robberies and assaults perpetrated mostly by criminals on motorcycles. I had a figure down there that 31% of the people feel insecure when walking or cycling in Barranquilla. So it certainly qualifies as an aggressive city for bikers. Let's move on now to Santiago. Santiago, on the other hand, is a much more organized city, but it's a very socially segregated metropolis. Here is a map of these 900 square meters I was mentioning to you. There is a couple of things I would love to show you here. If you go east-west, it's the main kind of axis of the city. And as you can see, very few people of low-income groups live in the east, in the eastern side, less than 25%. And the poor people are mostly located in the south and in the west-north. Carry on. In terms of the public transport system, Santiago has a very good and modern public transport system. We had about, in the last survey, 2012, we counted about 18.75 million trips per day, 26% of them by car, 25% by public transport. And as you can see here in the bottom, walking was 34%. So we are considering all trips there of any length. So that's the reason why there are so many walking trips. However, our public transport system, in opposition to the one in Barranquilla, has a very modern BRT fleet, over 6,000 modern buses. Most of them are now electric, integrated with a very good metro system. We have 140 kilometers of rail and 6 lines moving over 2.3 million people per day. And the main problems we are facing in public transport are overcrowding and the lack of respect for bus lanes, which can be legally used by taxis. Now, the city also has taxis, shared taxis, which are regulated, not as in Barranquilla, and an increasing use of the bike, which is now close to 8% rather than 4% in 2012. As you can see in that picture taken by Ricardo Urtubia, people in the bikes are really a lot in comparison to the rest of the traffic in many parts of the city. Next one. Right. The bicycle is gaining strength. This is a very nice thing that shows you a comparison between in 2012, so when we are only 4%, a comparison of the trips done daily by bicycle and by car using the urban highways. We have about 5 urban highways in Santiago, and we have spent a lot of money building highways and building metro lines as well, I have to say. And as you can see there, if you move to the next one, in total, if you count, because the people in the house in the low income levels are many more than the people in the higher income level, in 2012, we had more or less exactly the same number of trips by car using the urban highways and by bicycle. However, next one, the expenses in public transport, in transport from public funds between 2010 and 2016 were only 2.2% dedicated to cycle infrastructure. So, well, among other reasons, because it's much cheaper to build cycle infrastructure. Notwithstanding, since 2015, we have passed in Santiago from 179 kilometers to 525 kilometers of cycleways. And all of this, you can see more details in that little excerpt from Ricardo again. Next one. So, which are our research hypotheses? And very briefly, the willingness to use the bicycle on commuting trips by non-cyclists depends not only on the level of service attributes of the various modes, but also on attitudes and perception. That particular hypothesis was made quite clear to us if we look at what had happened in Santiago in the last years. In the good old days, there was in the bad old days, really, there was this very famous clip in the television that a very famous actor was riding a bike and a car passed by him and shouted to him, "Change to the car, Perico! Yeah? Cámbiate al auto, Perico." And this was very funny and unfortunately made the bicycle look as not very good for people that would have the ability to go by car. However, now the car has changed to be perceived as the mode of the fat guys that don't care about the environment, and the younger people are much more now riding bikes because they are happy about the health and environmental benefits of the bike. So our hypotheses in total are 4. Next one, please. The first one referred to Barranquilla. The perception of an aggressive environment affects negatively the choice of the bicycle. The second, third, and fourth are in Santiago. The quality of the built environment and the availability of cycle-inclusive infrastructure affects the choice of bicycle as much or even more than the level of service attributes. The third, the willingness to change to bicycle strongly depends on the habit developed by individuals for their usual travel modes. And finally, the relation between the fear, the feeling of insecurity with biking varies with trip characteristics and social demographic attributes of individuals. These are all very reasonable assumptions. We were able to show that all of them are correct. Carry on, please. So we now move to the first part of the work that Margaret did, which was a little study in Barranquilla that was published in this paper in the Journal of Sustainable Transportation. Please, the next one. Here we did a little stated choice experiment applied to 180 students and staff of Universidad del Norte, which is the main university in Barranquilla, where our friends Victor Cantillo and Julian Arellana work, and people that lived 3 kilometers or less away from the university and would use the bus. There was a new cycleway built, and we took the opportunity to do this little study. We used an efficient design with 2 blocks of 9 choice situations. We used 7 attributes, travel times. All these attributes varied in 3 levels. Cost, where the cost of bicycle was associated to parking inside the university. Access time and overcrowding for public transport. And bike facilities, where we tested cycleways, the ability of having a parking site inside the university, and that would cost some money but was very safe, and a shower. Showers are very crucial if you want to bike in Barranquilla, because when you bike, you are sweaty. Carry on, please. We had a survey that also included perception indicators of the satisfaction with using bikes, where we had statements that were the following: riding a bicycle, I can move easily, even with congestion. Cycling contributes to healthy lifestyle. Cycling generates economic savings, but on the other hand, riding a bicycle in Barranquilla is dangerous. When I ride, I feel uneasy because I may be robbed, and when I ride, I feel uneasy because I may have an accident. So these 6 statements led to some indicators, which were then evaluated using Likert scales from 1 to 5. 1, I'm not at all in agreement. 5, I'm totally in agreement. And with this data, we were able to build 2 latent variables: convenience, which is correlated with the indicators congestion, health, and savings above, and insecurity, which was correlated with danger, which we also called exposure later, robbery, and accident. Please carry on. We estimated a hybrid discrete choice model and other models also, but this was the better fit to the data, and the mimic component used an ordinal logic model to represent the measurement equations, as in the rest of the case. Carry on. Okay, here is a little figure showing the hybrid discrete choice model, where you can see we have the two latent variables and safety and convenience. We have the structural equations which relate these two latent variables with sex, age, being a professional that is the highest educational level, and having low income. And then you have these two latent variables explaining the indicators, theft, accident, danger or exposure, savings, health, and congestion that we saw before. And we put all of these into the utility function and estimated choice model. And I can show you next, please, the choice model here in the slide. And in this particular choice model, and unfortunately I cannot see very well because I have this thing covering my screen. I see if I can minimize this. Yes, there, lovely. So here, as you can see, it's a very correct looking model. It was better in terms of all the goodness of fit that we could master with a mixed logic model that could have either random coefficients or not random coefficients, but only error components. And here I would like to kind of stress that travel time for bus includes access time, and we call it total travel time in the slide to the left, because the parameters were more or less exactly the same, so we put it together. As I said, being a professional, which increases the travel time by bike parameter is there. We have overcrowding, which is again very bad for the point of view of bus user. And in the case of the bike, we have this having a shower was considered very interesting, but also it decreases whether you were young and female. Not very well, significantly different from 0 at the 95% case in the case of females. So it probably means that in our sample, females didn't use the bike a lot, I think, or were not happy about the bike. But for the younger people, it meant that probably they don't care about being sweaty as much as older people. And then we have the cycle way as a good and the two latent variables, convenience and insecurity, with proper signs and proper magnitudes. So that was I will come back to some conclusions about this later on. So we'll move to the next one. Now we go away from Barranquilla and we go to Santiago, where we have this first paper published by Margaret and Rick and us. Please, the next one. Here we used again an online, in this case, an online web survey. We did a lot of focus groups, also in the previous study, a lot of focus groups. We had here two sets of respondents. First, we sent the survey to academics and administrative staff, not students, at the 4 campuses that our university, the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, has in Santiago, and we were able to recruit 380 individuals. Then we wanted to have more people, and so we recurred to the social networks, Twitter, Facebook, etc., and we got about 1,000 more individuals answering the survey. The survey was about commuting in the morning peak, home-based trips. Please carry on the next. We were interested in people that were not using the bicycle. We interviewed users of all transport modes, but in the end, we only consider for our study the users of car and public transport. The users of the minor modes were very few, and we didn't consider them, 805 individuals. And they had to go to a survey which had trip characteristics, social demographic information, and then a crucial question: do you own a bicycle? If the answer was yes, they would go to the next stage, which would be, would you be willing, and this was a crucial question here, would you be willing to make your trip on your bike? And this had 3 possible answers: yes, maybe, no. On the other hand, if you didn't own a bicycle, you would go to the same thing, but asking whether you would be willing to make your trip on a public bike. And again, you would have the three options: yes, maybe, and no. If in both cases you said no, then we would ask some psychometric indicators. And if you said yes or maybe, we would go on to a stated choice survey about your mode, your current mode, and bike, private or public, depending on which case. And that will be the essence of the next paper that we will talk about later. Carry on, please, Carl. In all cases, we ask individuals to register their commuting trip, origin, and destination in a map. Carry on, please. And we use this data to build a lot of what we call built environment variables, such as distance to bus stops and cycleways, lengths of cycleways, distance to the main axis of the city, an entropy index calculated using a little formula that had been proposed by a friend of us. I just forgot the name of him now in MIT, a gringo that speaks Spanish too, Carla. And all this in a buffer of 500 meters at either the origin or the destination of the trip. More in the papers for why 500 meters, etc. Carry on. This is a depiction of the distribution of the origins and destinations in the city. As you can see, the origins are all over the place. The destinations tend to be more concentrated in the Alameda Providencia Apoquindo west-east axis, which is the part with where there is a kind of a central hub of business centers. And the main center of the city is more or less in the middle there, but it has been extended to the east through time, and now the more wealthy employment is more or less to the east. Okay, carry on, please. Right, these are the psychometric indicators in this particular case. We ask for, again, as in the case of Barranquilla, statements for being happy about using the bike, and we kind of form a latent variable called cycle facilities with them eventually. I mean, I find that my trip to bike is better if exclusive bicycle lanes along the entire route, if bicycle parking areas are near to my place, if I had guarded or enclosed bicycle parking areas, and if I have availability of shower lockers at work, right? So these were the kind of, not yet, in favor. Against the possibility of having an accident, of being robbed, and very importantly, concern about having a mechanical problem and not knowing what to do. I must confess, Cara, that this was much more important for women than for men, but that is life. Huh? And finally, we had these questions for the habit. And here we used a subscale of the self-reported habit index, SRHI, which was proposed by Verplanken and Orwell in 2013, and which had 12 of these statements. We used only 4, and I have to confess here a sin. To me, the 4 things I'm saying here, I do automatically, I do without thinking, I start doing before I realize I'm doing it, I do without having to consciously remember. The real truth is that for me, they look the same. And I said to my student, please, yeah, okay, let's use 4 of these 12 because the other 8 were also more of the same thing. But I honestly don't believe that we're going to get anywhere here. To my incredible surprise, next one, please. We found that people actually reacted quite differently to these things. As you can see here, the red ones are I'm not in agreement at all, and the green and the yellow are I'm in partial agreement and I'm in total agreement. They differ quite a lot. And this is the second time in my life that I have to say that psychologists have won over me, over my initial kind of feeling against what they say. The first one was when I was taught many, many years ago by a group of psychologists how to treat students when they were coming to our office. For example, I was one of those guys that I was working very hard in my computer. The student would appear in the door and I would say, come in, and without looking at him. And then I would kind of carry on working and the guy would be there. And my psychologist said to me, no, that's not the way you have to kind of almost stand up, can make him sit down. And then they told me to ask them, to empathize with them. This is very useful for you. That's the reason why I'm losing this little time here. And then, for example, I would say to them, what is going on with you? And the guy would say, look, professor, I have this problem. And there were some phrases, believe it or not, that I have to say. For example, oh, I see that you are worried. Yes, professor, I'm worried. You know, it worked like magic. It was incredible. I actually tested this with my wife once when I giving her breakfast. That's my best point in my marriage, is that I give breakfast to my wife in her bed. She loves that. So I came with my breakfast and I asked her, how was your day yesterday? And she said, oh, yeah, you know, but I had this problem. Oh, I can see that you're worried. And it worked. She started telling me all sorts of things. You know, she suddenly realized that I was playing with her with this new learned knowledge, and was not very happy. But again, psychologists are great. You know, I really believe. Next one, please, Carla. And here you can see also the responses to the bike perception indicators. And as you can see, they vary a lot, but definitely having exclusive bike lanes was the one that counted with more than 80% of the happiness of the people with respect to that particular thing. Let's go to the next one, Cara, please. Okay, here, this is the way the model looks. Remember, this model is a model where you are having as answers yes, maybe, or no to the question of, would you be willing to change to bike for your current trip, right? That's the question. And here, as you can see, we have 3 latent variables. Spontaneity, which is the reverse of habit, and which appears in the model as a systematic taste variation of the variable distance in the bike. No? And then we have risk, which is the variable associated with fearing risk when you are driving the bike, and cycle facilities, which was the other one that I mentioned before. Now, these variables are explained in the structural equations by frequency. It's very nice, frequency, because it's a measure of, it's an attribute. It's not a social demographic thing. So it has more kind of policy implications. Kids at home, number of cars, number of metro stations. Risk is explained by age, number of bicycles, gender, and cycleway meters. Again, interesting. And cycle facilities is explained by low income and medium income. So that's what we got. And they explain in turn the indicators that I showed you before. They go risk and cycle facilities as independent variables, and spontaneity as a systematic taste variation of the variables of the variable distance. And the variables are the ones that I show you in the left here: age, number of bicycles, household size, car usership, length, distance to bus stop, distance to cycleway, and the entropy index. Now, move to the next one, please, Cara. And here I have now the results of this model. With my next one, Cara, please. Here I'm putting a little blue thing on the level of service variables, and as you can see here, I'm comparing a simple with the hybrid discrete choice ordinal logic model. And as you can see, some things happen when you move from one to the other. For example, variables like a number of cars, which was not very significant, disappears, but female, which was very significant, disappears from the choice component. But I will tell you later, it comes back in a very interesting form. Also disappears this origin cycleway lanes, but which wasn't that significant, but it appears again, as you will see. Next one, please, Cara. Here we have then the latent variables. Spontaneity, which is explained by, as I said, frequency, kids at home, number of cars and origin metro stations, risk, and cycle facilities. And next one, please, Cara. As in here, as you will see, we come back, we get back the origin cycleway length as one of the things that explains the variables risk, So we recovered again inside the latent variable, which is interesting. Next one, please, Cara. And here also we recovered the variable sex. And this is quite interesting because Becky Liu, the chief editor of Travel Behavior and Society, I showed these little results to her in Hong Kong about 2 years ago, and she said to us that it was quite exciting because in terms of public policy, it's better to have it here inside the latent variable than as a number in the choice variable where it is of no use, because here it gives you a policy perspective in the sense that because women appear to be less likely to ride a bicycle for perceived security or for being not able to resolve a mechanical failure, more for perceived security than for other reasons. And it's something that we can use in a kind of campaign of, and this was, I thought, quite nice, and we put it in the paper. Next one, please. Okay, this is the final paper, which is still ongoing. And here I want to make a reference again to this magic supra reality in our South America. You know, probably in the States, Isabel Allende, and the very famous book that she wrote after, in a sense, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and all these things that we have. Well, Margaret thesis had a lot of supra magic reality involved in things that I'm not going to tell you here, but that and the pandemics made her take at least 2 years more than we would have expected for finishing the PhD. And so this is still going on, but we are near publishing now. The next one, please, Carl. Here we are using the same data as in the previous paper, but we added the last stage. I mean, we went on to the stated choice problem, where the people that had said that they were willing or maybe willing to change to bike, we now put them into, I mean, to see how good they were. I mean, you are willing, but now let's see what you do in terms of certain scenarios. Okay, please, next one. So we, of these 805 individuals that had participated in the previous survey, those that had traveled by car or public transport, we had that 175 had answered yes, that they were willing, 303 had answered maybe, and these were invited to answer the stated choice survey. Please, the next one. And in this particular case, we did a lot of cleaning data here, and we found things that were typical. You may have found them most times. 49 people were lexicographic respondents in the sense that they answered mainly on the basis of one attribute. We had to eliminate also 14 individuals which had reported very high travel times, over 90 minutes for their trip, so they would not use the bicycle, so that was ridiculous. Also, some 5 that were very high cost of travel. And also we had made a little mess in our programming the survey in Qualtrics, and we had 35 observations that were with no negative travel times or 0 travel times. So we ended up with a sample of 375 individuals for estimating our last choice mode. Please, Cara. These people were asked to respond to 6 situations each, from a blocked, efficient design that was pivoted on their current trip by bus or by car, and using priors from previous bike-related research in Chile done by Urtubia and colleagues. Okay, so the stated choice questions, they had 6 of them each one. This is an example here. In the case of subway here, for example, it could have been bus or car. They had to see a travel time, a fare. For example, this is in Chilean pesos, 740 Chilean pesos. At that time was about $1, but now the dollar has gone up to about 900. Walking distance, waiting time, and a level of occupancy, which could be no occupancy, more or less crowded and overcrowded. And then we had also all the time, it was the current mode against the bicycle, and the bicycle had the travel time, a parking fare, which would be in some cases only when they chose a particular type of parking. And this, for example, 200 is now about a fifth of a dollar. Walking distance to parking, type of parking, and type of biking pass. And and this is very interesting because we also have the possibility of saying that both were the same. I mean, either one is indifferent to me. And we played a lot with which was exactly the wording of these things, because we have learned before that what you put in the indifference alternative may change the result. Okay, so let's move to the next one. I show you here what are the levels of overcrowding. So the first one is no crowded, the second one is 4 passengers per square meter, and the last one is overcrowded with 6 passengers per square meter. And please, the next one, and I show you here the levels of the bicycle path. There is one where there was no bike path. The second one was a bike path painted blue in the street only. The third was a bike path in the curb, I don't know, side street, I don't know what you call this. And the last one was the best, was in the road, but segregated from the traffic. Okay, so let's and here are the types of parking. The first one is to secure the bike anywhere. The second one is to have cage parking, which is more secure. And the last one is with a guarded cage parking, so you have to pay for the service. And this was the fare that you had in the case of the bicycle. Okay, let's move to the next one, please. Now, we estimated again a series of models here. Again, the hybrid choice model was the best one. In this particular case was estimated using Apollo, and it had this relatively novel feature that we incorporated all the responses marked as indifferent following the methodology that had been proposed by Bahamonde de Birke et al. Carry on, please. Apart from the built environment variables tested, we created 3 dummies which were associated with distance. Distance is a very key variable in the case of bicycle trips. And another one to consider those individuals that, lacking a bike at home, stated that they were willing to use a public bike. Next one, please. To explain the habit, we were able to incorporate a frequency variable, which was measured as the number of times per week that the person made the trip in the same mode and at the same time. And this was nice because, again, we were able to have, no, carry on, that's okay, Carol. We were able to have an attribute in the model, in the measurement equation. Okay, here is the final results of the hybrid discrete choice model. As you can see, the constants, we had 5 modes, 6 modes, but here I don't have constants for car passenger and bus metro because they were not significantly different from the reference, which was the bike. Next one, please, Cara. Here I show you the level of service attributes of the model. And as you can see here, I'm interested in showing to you a couple of things. For example, if you look at the cost of, travel time by car and the travel time by public transport and by bicycle, you will see that the travel time by car is quite much higher value than the travel time in the other modes. In the case of public transport, the travel time is a lot less than the access time, which is correct, not as it had been in Barranquilla, where we found the same value, which is here is about 1.6 times more. The same happens with the walking time and bicycle time for bike users. They value the walk that they have to go after leaving the bike, for example, as more than the riding in the bike. Crowding, as you can see, is progressively important for public transport users. When it's crowded only, it's one level, minus 0.2. When it's overcrowded, it's minus 0.7 almost. Next one, please, Cara. In the case of the bike, travel time, this is affected by the 3 other variables, whether the cycleway is on the sidewalk, painted or segregated, And this go progressively forward. So segregated is the preferred cycleway type. Also having cage parking is preferable to leave the bike park anywhere. Carry on, please. The metro, as you can see in the built environment variables in the bottom, the metro loses attractiveness when the stations are further away from the destination. The buses gain attractive when they have more stops near the origin and when the destination is closer to this main axis of the city, the Alameda, Providencia, etc. axis. Finally, distance is a key for cycling attractiveness. Not only having cycleways near the destination is important, but also if the distance is over 3.5 kilometers in this particular case, there is a reduction in the preference for bike as a mode. Note that 3.5 is less than most cases that have been reported in literature before. And as I said before, in Santiago, at least 7 kilometers, the bicycle is king. But these guys, remember, were guys that were not using the bike. They were using bus or metro or car, etc. Okay. Finally, the both latent variables, habit and insecurity, are important and have the correct sign. Please, the next one, Cara. I'm reading the end of the. Here are the mimic model, and this is. I only was to mention, please, the next one. Two things here. Next one. First of all, note that in the structural equation for the habit, the distance again comes as something important. Habit is not important, not so important when you have very small distance, less than 2 kilometers, and still is less important when you have distances below 5 kilometers. This is interesting. Travel distance again is very important in terms of the bike for insecurity. As long as distance goes up, insecurity also goes up. Next one, please. And finally, in terms of insecurity, as you can see, being young, less than 46 years old, is means that you are less insecure about using the bike. Okay, next one. Right. So I finish up my presentation almost in time with some implications and conclusions. In the case of Barranquilla, please carry on, put them all, Cara. Incentives required to make the bike more attractive are required. For example, build cycle-inclusive infrastructure, integrate this with public transport for longer trips. We also found that in Santiago in studies that we had done before. Reduce the perception of insecurity associated with cycle. In the case of Barranquilla, by vigilance, better lighting, panic buttons include improved road infrastructure, signalization, safer crossings, have high density and mixed land use in the vicinity of cycleways, and educational campaigns for both drivers and cycle users. Finally, we also found that it was important to highlight the convenience and sustainability of cycling to work by educational campaigns about health and environmental benefits and incentive campaigns in the university community for using the bike, especially because they had now this new cycle lane outside. Next one. In the case of Santiago, we found 4 things. First of all, travel distance is the most important variable in the decision to use the bike because it affects both perception and choice. Then we have that in the case, carry on please, Cara. In the case of cycle infrastructure, the ability of this infrastructure is a necessary but not sufficient condition for achieving change from motorized modes to bicycle. Next one, please. Public transport crowding generates discomfort, especially in pandemic scenarios, and the bicycle is perceived as a good alternative to avoid or diminish the physical contact and to improve fitness. Carry on, please. Finally, habit is a relevant variable to consider when designing public policy, in particular if you're thinking about programs to increase bicycle use. Further, as a variable, and I didn't show you this, but it allows understanding some strange results of simpler models without the latent variables that we got. For example, we got very low significance for the cost variables in other models. But the problem is that habit, next one, is quite difficult to break. So shocks may be required, like we, for example, experienced, and we studied this before with my dear student Yañez, some years ago with when we implemented the new Transantiago system, that there was a shock, and we found that when there are shocks, maybe habit is revisited. So we would need, for example, to make a policy like we are now doing with this, improving our cycleways. That we have now a lot of cycleways, but now there could be a policy of making them really up to good standard, because they are not. And that policy could be really a shock that could make maybe a change in habit. Carry on, please. And I finish up with some future work, very, very briefly. We would like to include the quality of the cycleways as part of study of infrastructure. We would like to study the role of habit and perceptions of current cyclists also, because we didn't. We would like to design a panel survey that allows to explore changes in travel patterns after these important events, like I was saying, to study habit in the sense of a changing case. And finally, expand our research to representative samples of the cities that we analyze. That's it. Last one is just the reference that we had, and I'm very happy to have been here. I'm sorry I overstepped by about 5 minutes, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you very much.
Yes, you don't get quite the applause in these Zoom rooms that you deserve, but June's clapping his hands there, and we had very active chat box use. So Juan de Dios, I hope you can see the chat box. You've got your co-author Margaret helping with some of the questions. But yeah, you did not overstep. It's not easy to have somebody else hitting the down arrow, and I was typing a fair bit, so I was a little lagged, or I was over anticipating, and I'm apologize for that, but I think you did great. Great time.
It's great that Margaret answered, because she knows a lot more than me about the work, obviously.
Right. So
right, Cara, I don't know. I have a lot of.
I'll go ahead and I'll read off.
Please ask me whatever you want to know. Yeah.
Well, I think Inez was making the point that women behave very differently in terms of cycling. The mode splits are very different for men and women. And Jason was saying that may not be true over time, but you know, I've been around. I've been alive for more than half a century, and yeah, I've seen it. Maybe not as a child. But I think with my own children, I have boy-girl twins. So I have an N=2 data set. Yeah, the boy was always much more confident on the bike, much more spatially aware. That said, he has gotten in 2 car crashes where she has not. So overconfidence can be a problem. I've been overconfident on my bike. I don't bike with cars generally. But I've slid out or flipped my bike on trails. And so my wrist is forever messed up because of that. And so I'm not excited to go bike to work, because I just feel like I will probably get hurt every year. If I were biking, you know, 100 times a year, I'd probably be hurt every year. And so I've got scars. And of course I have that hurt wrist. And so I do think that the gender distinction will continue to play a huge role in a lot of things. It is one of the best predictors on almost anything I study, whether it's your probability of surviving a crash or drinking and driving and these kinds of things. And do you feel that too, Juan de Dios? You've been alive a little bit longer than I have, that the gender distinction on this mode in particular will continue?
Yeah, look, Cara, I have to say, for example, in my own family, my wife, Margarita, is 72 now, and she goes to work every day by bike when we are in Santiago. It's about 4.5 kilometers, but not only that, she goes to my campus, which is about 7.5 kilometers away, or 8, and she goes to everywhere in the city, and she loves to go, and she has a very little bike, which is, you can kind of put it together, and take it in the car or in the metro, but she likes to bike, and she has had accidents. One of them was very serious, and she always says that I saved her life because I brought to her the helmet that she had forgotten when we were visiting our kids, and we went back home, and she fell in a hole and went over and really had a huge crash. And luckily, she was wearing the helmet. The people in the hospital said without the helmet, she would not be there. So, but she refuses to stop biking. However, most women are not like her, I have to say. And most men actually don't. So Urtubia and Margarita and Lake Sagaris are really examples in my country, but I agree with you. I mean, it will be a time also because women, for some reason, and I think that will change, feel sometimes less capable of repairing something like a bike. But I think that is changing.
Yeah, so here on the UT Austin campus in Texas, we do have bike repair stands around. We have a couple of them, and I think we may have them downtown now. And of course, we have bike rental stations. And if you're a UT student for a whole year, you can pay just $13 because the local bus service, which is highly subsidized, you know, every dollar we spend, 1 cent of that goes to the bus service here. So they have more money than they need. So thank goodness they decided, well, maybe we shouldn't just be about buses, but we should start buying up these bike sharing arrangements that are not profitable for these private companies. And because we have such a hefty margin of subsidy here. So that's been a game changer, but they are mostly electric. And so they're a little bit heavier, and that means you also need to get them to a station to get them charged, which is a little bit of a problem. So I think after you bike, you feel much better. So I'm sure Margaret is getting lots of great endorphins, and maybe she doesn't have to go to the gym at all. So this is her gym. And I go to the gym separately. So it is not my gym unless I was biking a lot that day. Then, of course, that is my exercise for the day. So very different situation there. Jason or June, did anybody want to unmute themselves for a moment? Okay, so I did have some questions about the specification. You came up with, I forget, 2 latent constructs, and did you kind of know ahead of time what they would be because of what you were feeding into those latent constructs? So they didn't just sort of emerge and you decided to give them a name. You knew what they were going to be like insecurity, I think, and I forget the other one.
Yeah, we had an idea, of course, and when we did the preliminary study, the mimic model alone, if you want, we had the 3, for example, or 4, including I think in the last one, but not all of them came up in the final model when they estimated the model jointly. So sometimes you put an assumption about which are these things going to be. You suspect from your focus group, you suspect from previous work done, etc. And you have indicators that are geared to get some of those things in. But not all of them come up at the end of the day as significant. Right?
Yeah, and do you feel that this hybrid choice model with these latent additional variables that are amalgams basically of other variables you've collected are a lot like a neural network where you decide ahead of time exactly what it's going to look like and you make the parameters explicit? Do you feel it's like a simple explicit version of a neural net maybe?
No, I haven't thought about that really in that sense. No, I will tell you something. I'm really in favor of hybrid discrete choice models. I note that Joan Walker, which I admire a lot, sometimes ago decided that she didn't like them so much as before, but I have not been convinced. I still think that they are great, and they actually change quite a lot the aspect of your interpretation of the data when you have them in. And it doesn't work like very well if you don't do that in that sense. And sometimes the other people like Kaspar Curious, for example, have argued that you cannot use them in policy, but that is only the case when you are getting latent variables which only depend on social demographics. But when you're starting to get attributes inside the latent variables to explain them also, things start getting much more interesting. And as I said, the hint that we got from Becky Liu was quite nice, I think. In the interpretation of the female variable inside the latent variable was much more interesting than outside the latent variable. And I mean, I still believe that hybrid choice models are the top class of models at the moment.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Well, there are still more questions in there. I think June, were you about to unmute yourself? So June wanted to ask if there's some directions you can point young researchers towards in terms of questions that they should be tackling that are still unanswered.
Yeah, I mean, I was just asking this question for myself or people similar to me, Professor, I mean, could you please give us some high level suggestions for the future directions for this topic? Because I feel like this is a really important topic, but it has been researched, I mean, long time, and we can find many, many papers about those. Do you have any suggestions for the next steps?
Yeah, I would like to think that at the end of the lecture, I gave some suggestion, which was probably the most interesting in that sense. What about doing a panel data model of this sort? Because to incorporate really, have it properly, and to understand what happens in that kind of circumstances, you need panel data. So I reckon that could be a really good PhD thesis, having a panel and doing something with that. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Juan de Dios. Great topic, really nicely balanced with the other three, I guess, headliners. And Yoshua, go ahead. He's telling us where the next, sessions are. One will continue in this room. I'm trying to think which is the session that remains in this room.
It's mobility of care.
Mobility of care. Okay, so this
because they were asking.
Yeah, this is a special session, and all this discussion about gender is going to pitch you very nicely into this next session for those who want to stick around for that. Like Ines had a question, about data, and yeah, I look at the data, Ines, that's, but I also have my personal anecdotal experiences, but yeah, and I could see all the men biking by me on my street all the time. Very few women want that risk, I think, for some of that biking in the severe terrain where I live. So, but yeah, I also do, data is the center of my research universe. So thank you all so much. Please head to one of those other three rooms or join us here in the gender and caregiving mobility related topic for the next 2 hours. And those who have pets that want to send me photos of their pets, I can include those this afternoon in our pet parade. And it's just going to be a free-for-all discussion. It doesn't have to be about animals. You guys take care.